You were not supposed to be on that road. None of you were. But you went anyway, because that is what people do. They make plans. They leave late. They stop too many times. They tell themselves 2 more hours. We know the way. It will be fine. And then the rain starts. And then the headlights find something standing in the dark that should not be there. And nothing is fine again. There are 4 of you, crammed into a white sedan somewhere in the mountains of rural Appalachia, and the road has stopped making sense. The trees press in from both sides. The drop on the left goes down into nothing, just forest, and then darkness, and then somewhere far below, water you cannot see, but can feel. The wipers are screaming. The headlights are catching rain instead of road, and your friend in the driver's seat has both hands locked on the wheel, like if he lets go, the whole mountain swallows you whole. Then someone in the back seat says it. "Oi, look ahead." And you look, and she is standing there, alone, in the rain, in the dark, on a road where nobody stands alone in the rain, in the dark. And she is not afraid. That is the part that will not leave you. Not tonight. Not ever. The trip started the way all bad trips start, with the best intentions and absolutely no discipline. It was mid-October in the mountains of western North Carolina, somewhere in the long stretch of switchback highway that climbs out of the valley towns and into the kind of elevation that makes your ears pop and your phone signal dissolve. The Appalachian Range up here is old, older than almost anything in America, and it has the particular silence of places that have been watching people pass through for a very long time. The plan belonged to 4 friends from Charlotte. Marcus, who drove the white Civic and treated it like a second child. Ryan, who had been to this part of the mountains before and talked about it the way people talk about places they want other people to love as much as they do. Caleb, the quiet one, the one who would later become the most afraid and say the least about it. And the narrator, the one who is telling you this now, whose name was Daniel, and who had always been skeptical of mountain ghost stories the way skeptical people are before something happens to them personally. They were headed toward a hiking and camping area in the upper reaches of the Pisgah National Forest, a stretch of land that was legitimately beautiful in daylight and genuinely desolate by nightfall. Ryan had been there in August. He said the ridgeline views were worth it. He said if they left early, they would have hours of light to spare. They did not leave early. Marcus was still half asleep when Daniel called at 8 in the morning. Ryan showed up 40 minutes after he said he would. Caleb got turned around on the way to pick everyone up and added another 20 minutes to nothing. By the time they actually pulled out of Charlotte, it was just past noon, and Daniel had already done the quiet math in his head. Arrival time, sunset time, mountain driving in the dark, and decided not to say anything because saying something would make him the cautious one, and nobody wanted to be the cautious one. The drive was good at first, genuinely good, the kind of afternoon that makes you forget the math. They took the long way out of the city, and the air narrowed, and the air changed the way mountain air does, something in the pressure, something in the smell. And by the time they hit the first serious elevation, the windows were down. And Ryan was right. It was beautiful. The valleys below them draped in low October clouds, the trees just beginning to turn. They stopped twice, once for gas and bad convenience store sandwiches, once just to stand on a pullout and look at the ridgeline. Daniel noticed around 4 in the afternoon that the light was starting to angle. He said, "Hey, we should probably keep moving." Marcus said, "Relax, 2 hours out, maybe less." Ryan said, "I know this road, we're fine." And they got back in the car. The light kept angling. There was one small thing Daniel noticed on that pullout that he would not understand until much later. Below them, about 100 yards down the slope, there was a white shape at the tree line. He assumed it was a plastic bag caught in a branch, or a pale patch of rock. He did not look long enough to be sure. He got back in the car and forgot about it within minutes. He would remember it at 2 in the morning, on the floor of a stranger's cabin, listening to something circle the walls from the outside. The weather turned just past 5 o'clock. 1 minute the sky was flat and gray and manageable. Then the clouds dropped, and the air pressure changed in that specific way that people who spend time in the mountains learn to recognize and dread. And then the rain arrived. Not gradually, not politely, but all at once, as if something had tilted a bucket the size of the sky. The wipers went on. The windows fogged. Marcus dropped speed without being asked, and the car got very quiet. On the left side of the road, the terrain fell away steeply into forest. On the right, rock face pressed close. The road was barely wide enough for 2 cars to pass without one of them kissing the shoulder, and the rain was turning the shoulder into mud. Every few hundred yards, tree branches reached out over the road like something trying to slow them down. The network had been spotty for the last 20 minutes. Now it was gone entirely. Caleb said, "No signal." Daniel made a joke. Nobody laughed. They kept driving. The rain got worse before it got better, which is the way mountain rain works. It tests you first. The headlights were doing almost nothing useful. Whatever was more than 30 feet ahead dissolved into water and dark. Marcus was watching the painted line on the right side of the road, using it like a guide wire. Ryan had the Maps app open on his phone, even though the map was not loading. He kept tilting the screen like that would help. It was Ryan who saw her first. Guys, look!" She was standing on the left shoulder of the road, right at the edge of the headlight reach, maybe 40 feet ahead. White clothing, pale as paper against the dark tree line, hair plastered flat and dark from the rain, standing completely still, facing the road, one hand just beginning to rise, slow, deliberate, in the gesture that means stop. Not running, not waving frantically, not doing any of the things a person standing alone on a mountain road in a rainstorm would do if they needed help. Just standing and raising one hand and looking. Marcus eased off the gas. Daniel said, "Don't stop." It came out before he finished the thought, something below rational, something the body decided before the brain could weigh it. Marcus hesitated. 2 seconds. 3. The car drifted to almost nothing. Then he pressed the gas, and they moved past her. Daniel looked as they passed. He could not help it. She was, and he would struggle to describe this later in the way that made sense, she was too composed. The word that kept coming back to him was waiting. Not like someone who needed to be rescued, like someone who had been standing there for a while, confident that eventually something would come. No fear, no desperation, no relief when the car slowed. Just eyes that tracked the car as it moved past with an expression that said, "I know you are not stopping. That is all right. I will see you again." The car went silent. They left her behind in the rain and the dark. Ryan said quietly, "If she really needed help." Daniel said, "If she really needed help, she would have run toward us. She would have done something. She didn't move." Nobody argued. Nobody was really trying to convince anyone of anything. They were all trying to convince themselves. 5 minutes later, the mountain answered. The sound came from above and to the right, a low crack first, like something structural giving way, then a deep groaning roar as the hillside shifted. Marcus hit the brakes hard. Before any of them fully understood what was happening, a rock the size of a small refrigerator came rolling out of the dark above and struck the front left corner of the car with a sound like a gunshot. The car lurched sideways. Airbags did not deploy. Everybody hit something: door, headrest, each other. The car stopped diagonally across the road. Driver's side front crumpled. And for about 3 full seconds, nobody made a sound. Then Marcus yelled out, and all 4 doors opened, and all 4 of them were standing in the rain. Small stones were still tumbling down from the slope above. They moved away from the car, closer to the drop side, and stood there getting drenched while their hearts tried to leave their bodies. The front corner of the car was badly damaged. The hood was folded. The front panel on the driver's side had pushed back toward the tire, which meant the car might move, but probably would not move far. Caleb said, breathing in pieces, "We're okay. We're okay. God, we're okay." They stood there for a minute, letting the adrenaline begin to metabolize. And then Daniel felt movement on the left, below the road, down the slope, in the trees, in the dark and rain. Something was coming up. He turned on his phone flashlight and aimed it at the tree line below the shoulder. She was already most of the way up the slope. White clothing, wet hair, the same woman. Standing now at the edge of the road, close enough that the flashlight caught her face directly, and she turned, not startled, not blinded, but deliberately, and looked straight into the light. And then she ran, down, back into the trees, with a speed that the terrain should not have allowed. Rain-slicked soil, steep grade, dark, and she moved through all of it like none of it applied to her, like gravity was a suggestion she had chosen to ignore. Within seconds, she was gone into the tree line, and the dark swallowed her completely. The 4 of them stood on the road in the rain and did not speak. Ryan said quietly, "How did she get down there?" Nobody answered. because the answer required understanding how she had traveled from a point on the road behind them to a point on the slope below them in less than 5 minutes, in the dark, in the rain, without using the road. Daniel said, "This is not right." That is all he said. They went back to the car. The repair attempt lasted about 20 minutes. They had tools in the trunk. Marcus always kept tools. And they worked on the crumpled front panel in the rain, trying to pry it back far enough that the tire could rotate freely. Hands slipping, ground turning to mud under their feet. Every minute or two, one of them would stop and turn toward the tree line to the left. They heard a sound from somewhere in the forest, a stone, maybe, hitting something wooden, or maybe not a stone. Then Daniel saw white through the trees. He did not say what he saw. He just said, "Get in the car." Caleb dropped the tools and moved before Daniel finished the sentence. Nobody argued. All four of them climbed back in and pulled the doors shut, and the sound of the rain wrapped around the car like a held breath. It was quieter inside, not better, quieter. Then something knocked on the rear bumper. Once, then again. Then they felt something moving along the undercarriage. Caleb leaned forward so fast he almost hit the headrest in front of him. "There's something under the car." They all went still. Then something landed on the roof. Not fell, landed. There was a weight to it, a deliberate impact, and the roof bowed slightly with the sound a car roof makes when it has to handle something it was not built for. Nobody breathed for 3 full seconds. Ryan said very quietly, "It could be a monkey." Even he did not believe it. The silence stretched. No sound of movement on the roof, no animal noise, no sliding or scratching that would mean something was repositioning. Just wait. Just the quiet awareness of something above them that was not moving because it did not need to move. Then scratching at the trunk. Fingernails or something functionally identical to fingernails, moving slowly along the metal. Marcus reached for the ignition. The engine started, but the car would not go forward. The crumpled panel was still touching the tire. The car lurched once, twice, and died. "It will not move," Marcus said, and his voice was completely flat, which was worse than if he had been panicking. Another knock at the rear door, then 2 more. Hard, rhythmic, aggressive, not a frightened person, not a neighbor, not anything asking for help in a recognizable human pattern. Something that knew a door was a door and wanted to know why it was not opening. Then lightning. A single flash, 2 seconds, and in that window, in the fogged and water-streaked rear glass, a face. Close. Both palms flat against the glass from outside, head tilted down slightly, looking in. Not the face of someone who was frightened, the face of someone who had been waiting. The lightning died. Darkness returned. The figure was gone from the glass. Caleb was making a sound that was not quite words. Marcus had both hands still on the wheel, but his fingers were not moving. Ryan had gone completely silent, which Daniel understood to mean Ryan was somewhere past fear and into something he did not have a name for. Then the car moved. Not from the engine, from behind. A shove. The car rocked forward several inches and stopped. Then again, and this time it moved further. The road tilted left.
The drop was right there, 30 feet to the tree line, and then a long slope into the ravine below. Marcus said, "We go on 3. Everyone out. We run." Daniel said, "And if she's right outside?" Marcus said, "At least outside we can run." One push, then a second, harder. 3, Marcus said, and all 4 doors opened.
Daniel hit the ground running and nearly went down in the mud. He caught the car door and righted himself. Behind the car, for just a moment, in the combined light of all 4 phone flashlights, something white was retreating into the tree line on the left, moving fast. Gone. They did not follow it. Marcus said, "Leave the car," and they ran down the road. The light appeared after about 10 minutes. A single pale glow below and ahead, not electric, something warmer, something older. A small house set back from the road, a covered porch, and inside a lantern burning. They knocked. They kept knocking. Eventually a man opened the door. He was middle-aged, wrapped in a blanket, holding a flashlight. He looked at the 4 of them, soaked, white-faced, breathing too fast, with the particular calm of someone who was not entirely surprised. He did not invite them inside. He asked where their car was, how many there were, what had happened. They told him the landslide. They told him the car. They did not tell him about the woman. He said he could not house them himself, but there was a man up the ridge who sometimes rented space. Then, as he led them up the path, he asked, quietly, not looking at any of them directly, whether they had seen anything on the road up above. Nobody spoke for a moment. Ryan said, "What do you mean?" The man said, "In the forest, at night. Sometimes people see things that seem like they need help. A woman on the road, someone calling out. You should not stop. You should not go near." He said nothing else about it. They did not tell him that they already knew. The cabin he brought them to was small, 1 room, wooden walls, a weak lantern, no electricity, the forest starting directly behind the back wall. An old man opened the door, looked at them for a long moment, and finally nodded. He laid bedding on the floor, placed the lantern in the center of the room, said stay until morning, and left. When his footsteps faded into the rain, all 4 of them understood for the first time exactly where they were. Not safe, just indoors. They ate what the first man sent up. Simple food, hot tea, the kind of meal that feels like grace when you have had the night they had. They changed into dry clothes from their bags. They bolted the door. They checked the window twice. They lay down, but did not sleep. The rain kept falling. The lantern kept burning, and for a while, nothing happened. Then the lightning showed them the window. A figure outside, both hands against the glass, head bent slightly, looking in, the same way she had looked into the rear window of the car. Caleb made a sound. The lightning died. Silence. Then pressure against the door, not a knock yet, something slower, methodical, as if fingers were testing the frame, checking whether the bolt was real. And then the knocking started. Not like a person, not the knock of someone frightened in the rain who needed shelter. This was aggressive and haphazard, and underneath it, from somewhere just off to the side of the door, a woman's voice, low, drawn out, something between a cry and an instruction, words that did not resolve into language, a sound that had the shape of human grief without the content of it. They all started praying. Every one of them, not for each other, for themselves,
separately, in their own words, at the same time. Marcus moved to the small window beside the door and looked through. He stepped back immediately. "She is sitting outside the door," Ryan asked. "How is she sitting?" Marcus said. "Hunched over, rocking back and forth." He could not explain that part, the slow rhythmic movement of something sitting just outside a bolted door in the dark, rocking like it was waiting for morning as patiently as they were. The night continued. It lasted a very long time. At intervals, sometimes 30 minutes apart, sometimes less, there was a sound at the window or pressure near the door, or once, unmistakably, the sound of something heavy moving from one tree to another outside the back wall. Once, Daniel was certain he saw the same white shape through the gap in the window shutters, standing at the tree line, not moving. He stopped looking after that. He noticed sometime past midnight that whenever the presence outside seemed closest, the air inside the room went colder. Not the natural cold of mountain rain, something that moved through the walls. He pulled the blanket tighter. He did not mention it to the others. He did not need to. He could see Caleb doing the same thing, pulling fabric up to his chin, eyes on the ceiling. Nobody watched the time. The battery had to last. There was no signal. There was nothing to do except wait and read and breathe and wait. The darkness outside the window changed eventually.
Not quickly, not all at once. First, the absolute black became something more like charcoal. Then the rain softened from heavy to persistent. Then, slowly, the window glass began to hold light instead of just reflected back as nothing. Daniel did not realize he had been holding his breath until he exhaled. "It's getting light," he said. Nobody celebrated. They just started moving. They opened the door together and looked down. There were impressions in the mud directly in front of the threshold, not animal marks. The shape of a person having sat in one place for a long time, the way mud holds the specific weight of a body in stillness. Hand marks on either side of the impressions, where something had placed its palms flat against the ground. Below the window, scratches in the mud at the base of the wall, and something like footprints, but the spacing was wrong. None of them spoke. They walked straight down to the road. When they reached the car, there were marks on the rear quarter panel. Long, parallel lines that could have been branches, could have been claws, could have been fingernails. The pattern in some places was too regular to be random, too deliberate to be weather. They fixed the panel in the morning light. It took 40 minutes. The tire rotated, the engine turned over. They drove down the mountain without speaking. When they reached a small market town in the valley, they stopped. They drank coffee. A mechanic looked at the front damage and said the rock must have hit hard. He noticed the scratches on the rear, but said nothing about them. He probably assumed it was brush from a narrow road. They did not correct him. They drove back to Charlotte. The playlist stayed off. No one suggested otherwise. For the first few weeks afterward, they talked about it. Then less, then barely. Not because they stopped believing it. All 4 versions of the night matched too precisely for doubt to have much room, but because there was nothing more to say. At a certain point, you have told the story to everyone who will hear it, and the story is still exactly what it is. and the telling does not make it smaller. Daniel says he still thinks about the moment they passed her on the road, the way her hand rose, not frantic, not urgent, slow and certain, as if she had done it before, as if she knew they would not stop, as if stopping was never really the point. Here is what I think about when I think about this story. We talk a lot about the things that frighten us in darkness, the sounds, the shapes, the unknowable things at the edge of the light. And those things are real in their way. That cold, that weight on the roof, the marks in the mud, all of it. But I keep coming back to the first moment, the choice. 4 people in a car on a dark road in the rain, and something on the shoulder with its hand raised, and the immediate, visceral, pre-rational decision, do not stop. We like to believe that our instincts protect us from the supernatural, that some part of us can sense when something is wrong. And maybe that is true. Maybe the body knows before the mind does. But here is the part that stays with me at the end of a night like this one. They did not stop because she was too calm, too still, too composed for the circumstances. And I wonder sometimes late at night when the house makes its sounds and the dark outside the window holds its shapes, I wonder whether the thing that made her wrong was the absence of fear. Whether what we recognize as human is not the face, not the shape, not even the voice, but the fear itself. We are afraid of things. We are afraid of the dark, of falling, of being alone on a mountain road in the rain. And something that looks like us but is not afraid, in the circumstances where fear would be the only rational response, that is the thing we cannot look at directly. That is the outline of something older than language and outside the boundaries of everything we have been told is real. They did not stop, and she came to them anyway. There is a version of that night where they stopped the car on a dark mountain road because someone seems to need help. No one has ever told that version.